We move into our time of meditation. I want to invite you to take a comfortable seated position. You may close your eyes and take a deep breath. Position yourself such that your body affirms, radiates, and broadcasts an attitude of presence. Envision the image of a mountain and all the qualities it maintains. Elevation, massiveness, majesty, unmovingness, rootedness, stillness, and dignity. Invite these qualities into your meditation with mindfulness.
Yesterday I was listening to my Helen Reddy Pandora station while I was working out, which, as I said first service, it tells you how fast I move when I work out. And I actually have trouble keeping up. That's the worst part. But I actually heard a song, Olivia Newton-John came on and sang a song. I have had a secret crush on Olivia Newton-John, for years, and I really despise John Travolta because of it. But she sang this song, some of you might remember it, from 1975, called "Have You Never Been Mellow?" And I heard it and I said, that is today's reading. The words are just perfect. There was a time when I was in a hurry, as you are. I was like you. There was a day when I just had to tell my point of view. I was like you. Now, I don't mean to make you frown. No, I just want you to slow down. Have you never been mellow? Have you never tried to find a comfort from inside you? Have you never been happy just to hear your song? Have you never let someone else be strong? Running around as you do with your head up in the clouds, I was like you. Never had time to lay back, kick your shoes off, close your eyes. I was like you. Now, you're not hard to understand. You need someone to take your hand. Have you never been mellow? Have you never tried to find a comfort from inside you? Have you never been happy just to hear your song? Have you never let someone else be strong? Thank you both so much. And again, Dixie Marshall, it's always wonderful to have you with us and to hear you play. Several years ago, a couple at my church in Louisville were in a pretty serious car accident. Their injuries were severe enough that I went to the hospital every day for a couple of weeks to check in on them. It wasn't much, but it was a smaller congregation. I had the time, and I figured it was the least I could do. After a couple of days, Mel, who was in the hospital the longest, kept complaining that he couldn't see well enough to read or even watch TV because his glasses had been thrown off in the accident. So I knew it was a long shot, but I left the hospital and drove to the scene of the accident to see if I could find them, and unbelievably found them undamaged on the curbside. So I was elated and couldn't wait to get them back to Mel. It felt like I was doing something really practical to help alleviate his suffering. And, usually the most I'm able to do in response to another's pain is show up, visit for a bit, express my sincere concern and sympathies, and then leave. As much as I care and I wish to be of genuine service, I usually feel helpless to do or say anything meaningful. But this time I was able to do something real, something important, something that made me feel like more than just a lump on a log. Against the odds, after a couple of days on a busy road, I managed to recover Mel's glasses and with them his eyesight. He thanked me and eagerly began reading the paper for the first time since his accident. I was a bit disappointed, however, that he never mentioned the glasses again, or seemed to remember that I'd even retrieved them, even though to me it felt like a really, really big deal. But when Mel and Patrick finally got home and were able to come back to church, they repeatedly thanked me for being there. We just can't believe you came every day to see us. That's when I understood the importance of what I'd been taught during my ministerial training, that the most important part of pastoral care is just being present. In other words, as the White Rabbit tells Alice in Wonderland, don't just do something, stand there. Of course, the rabbit was always in a hurry, frantically repeating, I'm late, I'm late. So it probably fumbled the phrase in its haste, but it's still sage advice. Just being there for Mel and Patrick wasn't the least I could do. It was the most important thing I could do. The thing that they remembered and were most thankful for, even though it felt to me like I wasn't doing anything at all. As I've learned over the years, satisfying the urge to do something or to say something, especially in the wake of another's grief or pain, often results in doing or saying the worst possible thing. God works in mysterious ways. They're in a better place now. Someday you'll look back at all this and laugh. Trying to put lipstick on tragedy or divert attention away to happier thoughts usually only adds up to more pain and more grief. It's better to simply say, I'm sorry, than be present like a lump on a log. Being still, being present, doing nothing is, paradoxically, often the best medicine any of us can offer. This principle of keeping still, of doing nothing, which may sound easy but is often the hardest thing to accomplish, is important in our lives in general too. Resisting the headlong tumble into the next moment, as Reverend Kathleen Mateague so eloquently puts it, may be to resist the fundamental temptation of each moment. The white rabbit has trouble experiencing this moment because it's always looking at its watch, wondering about the next moment. It reminds me of Benjamin Hoff's treatment of yet another fictional rabbit, the rabbit in the beloved book, The Tao of Pooh. Hoff reminds us of Rabbit's discovery of a note on Christopher Robin's door. Gone out, Baxen, busy Baxen. Rabbit didn't know what a Baxen was, Hoff writes, in spite of the fact that he was one. The busy Baxen is almost always desperately active. If you ask them what their life interests are, they will give you a list of physical activities such as skydiving, tennis, jogging, racquetball, skiing, swimming, water skiing. Hoff further illustrates the point with an old Taoist story about a man who dislikes his footprints in shadow. So he begins running to escape them. And the more he runs, the more footprints he creates, and of course his shadow easily keeps up. So he runs faster and faster until he finally dies of exhaustion. If he had stood still, Hoff explains, there would have been no footprints, and if he had rested in the shade, his shadow would have disappeared. A big part of the problem is the idea of being still runs counter to our Western notion of what it means to even be alive, and to our notion, the notion of doing nothing is counter to our Protestant work ethic, sometimes called the American work ethic. The founders of Western society, the ancient Greeks, may not have known about the pulmonary vascular system and how it circulates blood to the lungs, where blood red cells pick up oxygen and release carbon dioxide, but they did understand that if something breathes, it's alive. And if it doesn't breathe, it's dead. Pretty simple science. Because of this, they didn't consider there to be a difference between the life and the soul, or between spirit and breath. In the Iliad, for example, as psychologist Julian Jaynes once noted, the word psyche, or psyche, which later means soul or conscious mind, in most instances means life substances such as blood and breath. How many of us think of our soul as being blood and breath? A dying warrior bleeds out his psyche on the ground or breathes it out in his last gasp. Jaynes also tells us another Greek word for soul, thumos, originally just meant motion or agitation. For our ancestors to be alive, to have a soul, to be inspirited, meant movement. Which is why yet another word, the Latin word for soul, anima, is also the root of the word animation. In the Hebrew creation myth, the word for breath and spirit, as in many languages, is the same word, meaning breath. The Lord God formed Adam from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Conversely, they understandably concluded one who doesn't move must be dead. That death comes with the last breath when the spirit leaves the body, the respiration. That's why inspiration and respiration share the same root, because for our ancestors they meant almost the same thing. Today, we still tend to associate movement with life and stillness with death, animation with living things and stillness with inanimate objects. Henry Ford, inventor of those horseless carriages that now move us miles in just minutes, believed that the soul literally leaves the body with the final breath of life. He took this so seriously that he convinced the son of Thomas Edison, whom he admired, to hold a test tube to his dying father's mouth in order to capture his last breath. The corked tube was discovered in 1950 by Ford's relatives and is now on display at the Henry Ford Museum, also known as the Edison Institute in Detroit. So perhaps Ford felt that by enabling us to move about in automobiles, he was contributing to life itself, to life's movement. Maybe it's why so many others enjoy the rush of moving fast cars, downhill skiing, motorcycles, roller coasters, skydiving, bungee jumping, and so on. And maybe it explains why we keep developing new technologies that make everything go by even faster. Instead of snail mail, we use email and text and Twitter and things I haven't even heard of yet. We can now share our thoughts and our photos with all of our friends almost instantly, thanks to our smartphones. For some reason, my phone tells me every night how active I've been. I haven't asked it to. I don't know how to make it stop. Congratulations. You took 137 more steps today than you did yesterday. Whoopee. It sounds so condescending, doesn't it? The other day it told me, you know what your most active month of the year was? June. Like it's been 6 months, just get over it. It may be our ancestors who first associated life with movement, but today our lives are busier than ever. Sometimes we don't feel alive unless, like White Rabbit, we're late for the next moment, the next thing we must do, the next bit of activity or distraction or play. Once while driving, I approached what I thought was a dead dog on the side of the road, but just as I passed, I saw a puff of breath, which told me it was alive. I pulled over and was able to at least remove the animal for the road and give it some comfort before its sad demise. But I knew that what I had thought to be dead was actually alive when I saw its breath in the form of exhaust. Today it makes me wonder how many of us don't feel alive until we're exhausted, until we're too tired to do anything else, finally go to sleep, and get up and begin to do it all over again. In the U.S., especially where the philosophy of pragmatism was born, the idea that something is only useful if it works, has become part of how we view each other too, that we're useless if we don't work. The whole point of education has become preparing our kids to get a job so they can spend the rest of their lives working. According to Juliet Shore's book, The Overworked American, a third of our population reports feeling rushed and stressed every day of their lives. A majority of us get 1 to 1.5 hours less sleep than we need each night, and over half report having too little time for their families, all of which is leading to increased instances of child neglect, marital distress, sleep deprivation, and stress-related illnesses. In our association of life with activity, furthermore, we have forgotten that activity requires energy. and thus ignore the wisdom of energy conservation. Exertion may express life, but it also exhausts and drains it. Today, our species is using so much energy that we're exhausting our entire planet. Our entire planet is exhausted. Some are acting as if they won't stop or can't stop until, like Henry Ford, they're able to capture the very last breath, the Earth's last gasp. Last gasp, the root of which, ironically, is gas, a word that etymologically means empty. Some of us refuse to stop moving until our gas tank is empty, until the final drop is burned up, until the last drop of oil is sucked out of the ground and the last chunk of coal is torn from a decapitated mountain, until the earth itself dies of exhaustion, of having its resources, its energy, exhausted like that dying dog on the side of the road. Fortunately, the world's great religions almost all urge us to practice stillness in our lives. It's even one of the 10 Commandments. 6 days you shall labor and do your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath day, the day of your Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you or your children, or your male servant, or your female servant, or your ox, or your donkey, or any of your cattle, or your foreign traveler who lives amongst you, so that your male servants and your female servants may rest just as well as you. In other words, everyone, especially the most overworked, especially the most exploited, women, children, slaves, immigrants, even our animals, according to the first labor law in human history, must get a break. As Ecclesiastes says, better is one hand full of quietness than 2 hands full of toil and striving after the wind. This principle of doing nothing is more subtly expressed in the Christian tradition as grace. That there is nothing that we need to do or can do to be saved. As the mystic author of The Cloud of Unknowing wrote, the active life is troubled and busy about many things, but the contemplative life sits in peace with the one thing necessary. The more contemporary Christian mystic Thomas Merton once said, there is a pervasive form of contemporary violence, activism, and overwork. And Jesus himself is reported to have said, look at the birds in the sky. They don't plant or harvest or gather food into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. You are more valuable than them, aren't you? Can any of you add a single hour of length to your life by worrying? And why do you worry about clothes? Consider the lilies of the field and how they grow. They don't work or spin yarn, but I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was clothed like one of them. Why worry? Jesus asked, when there's so much abundance all around us. At least there would be if we stop exhausting the earth's resources. If we'd give our mother, our great mother, a Sabbath, the time that she needs to rest and recreate. If busyness can become a kind of violence, theologian Wayne Mueller says, we do not have to stretch our perception very far to see that Sabbath time, effortless, nourishing rest, can invite a healing from the violence. Buddhism most directly recognizes the value of sitting still and doing nothing, of just being and breathing through its practice of meditation. Of course, many of us manage to make a chore out of meditating too. It becomes one more thing we have to do. Or go somewhere to do, or worry that we're not doing it right if we can't empty our mind of all our thoughts or ignore the disruptive noises around us. But I remember Alan Watts explaining that meditation isn't something we do. It's something we don't do. Or rather, we sit still because we realize there's nothing else we need to do. When you realize that you have come to your wit's end, he said, you can begin meditation. Meditation happens. How's that for a bumper sticker? And that happening is simply the watching of what is. That's it. That is really what meditation is, he said. Sometimes when people ask me if I meditate, I say yes for several hours a day. And I'm able to empty my mind of all thoughts for much of that time. The secret, I find, is meditating horizontally and at night. Of course, I've been doing it for a long time. So, lots of practice. Taoism also stresses the importance of doing nothing. Its notion of wu wei literally means to accomplish by doing nothing. Sounding much like Jesus, an old Chinese proverb says, sitting quietly, doing nothing, spring comes and the grass grows by itself. Karen Armstrong said the ancient Chinese took this notion so seriously that their most revered spiritual and political leader, their prince, had to be entirely passive. He did not direct the administration. He gave no orders. Maybe we could pass that on. Anybody important is watching. Or as Confucius put it, he ruled by inactivity. Wu wei, doing without doing. In fact, the Chinese pictograph, it may surprise you to learn, the word for busy is symbolized by two characters meaning heart killing. Being too busy, they thought, is heart killing. Maybe this explains why 20% more heart attacks happen before 9 a.m. on Monday mornings in our country, right before the start of the work week, than any other time. Practice not doing, the Tao Te Ching tells us, and everything will fall into place. We join spokes together in a wheel, but it is the center hole that makes the wagon move. We shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. We work with being, but non-being is what we use. Fill your bowl to the brim and it will spill. Keep sharpening your knife and it will blunt. Tao never acts, yet nothing is left undone. Today, most heart attacks happen before the work week begins. And most of us are busier than ever despite or because of all the technology that's supposed to make life easier and less stressful. We've got more forms of communication bombarding us than we can humanly respond to. So sorry about those emails I've not answered. More forms of digital distraction than we can keep up with, and more opportunities to take advantage of than we can take advantage of. Worst of all, We are destroying our planet in the process, exhausting her natural resources in our insatiable demand for constant growth and summertime fun. As a species, we don't value the importance of winter, the Earth's Sabbath, the period that she's supposed to rest. We no longer let winter stop us from having fresh vegetables on our tables, or from harnessing the Earth's energy, or from stopping us from being on the move. In our association of movement with life, we have rejected winter and have nearly brought about perpetual summer in the process, called global warming. All because of all this, I should say, today more than ever, we must also begin to listen to the sages of old, to obey the Sabbath law, to look to the birds of the air and to the lilies of the field, to sit still and watch what is, fall asleep, and to accomplish what we now need most of all by doing nothing. We must embrace winter again and begin conserving energy. For isn't that the advice that we give to those we know who are ill and injured? Just rest. Conserve your strength. Today we're doing violence to ourselves by overdoing it, and violence to others by making them overwork just to make ends meet, and violence to the earth by exhausting her resources, her energy, her life, her last breath. So instead of taking her breath away, why don't we all just take a breather, give it a rest, lie beside still waters, and be comforted?
Our closing hymn today is number 90. It's From All Fret and Fever of the Day. And since this is one that we have not used almost at all, shows how busy we folk are, right? I'm going to have Michelina play the complete melody through slowly so that you can be acquainted with it. You can rise as you're willing and able. From all the
Our closing benediction today is a quote by Walt Whitman from Leaves of Grass. I exist as I am. That is enough. If no other in the world be aware, I sit content. If each and all be aware, I sit content. One world is aware, and by far the largest to me, and that is myself. And whether I come to my own today, or 10,000 years, or 10 million years, I can cheerfully take it now, or with equal cheerfulness, I can wait. Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum. Shalom.